is I think a lot of the things we do that we maybe later regret, we're doing that thing to solve for boredom, or we're stressed out at work. So buying the Amazon thing or eating the Doritos or whatever, going on this crazy internet social media binge solves that short-term stress, solves the short-term boredom, but it's a way that solves it that has long-term consequences.
Welcome to the Mountain Tough Podcast, brought to you by Sig Sauer. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Mountain Tough Podcast. I am Dustin Diefenderfer, founder and CEO of Mountain Tough, and I am so glad that you are here. It is our goal every single week to bring you an inspiring guest that adds mental fitness tools to your toolbox so that you can overcome adversity again and again, so that you can live an abundant life with this always ready lifestyle. If you are a new or a loyal listener, and if you have a second, if you haven't done so already, and if you can leave us a ranking or review in the podcast store of your choice, those do mean the world to us. I love seeing your feedback, and any way we can improve is greatly appreciated. Also, the rankings and the reviews do, through the algorithm, allow these episodes to get out to more people to transform more lives. Mountain Tough in the lab here in Bozeman, Montana at HQ has been rocking and rolling this summer. Many of our Mountain Tough customers are in the middle of preseason prep, getting close to finishing up preseason prep as archery season is quickly approaching. We have a lot of guys heading to Alaska in August that have been training very hard the last 4 months through Mountain Tough Plus, a lot of them in preseason prep 2.0 and PP50. The big update is we launched preseason prep 2.0 last year after 3 years of new research and testing, and I'm stoked to announce to you guys that after years of development, postseason strength 2.0 will be launched this fall. I know a lot of you have been asking for that for a while, but our strength program post-hunting season that we have been developing for years will be brought to you in Mountain Tough Plus either this September or October. So we are working hard on finishing that up, getting those videos shot, getting that in the app, so stand by for that. Shifting gears to today's guest, this is our first returning guest to the Mountain Tough Podcast. He has been on the show before, and he was back for Tough Fest this year, and I was able to sit down with him again. Today on the show, we have Michael Easter. Most of you are familiar with Michael, a prolific author of The Comfort Crisis, a life-changing book, and his newest book, Scarcity Brain. I had the chance to sit down at Tough Fest with Michael, and I was particularly interested in the new book, Scarcity Brain. And I wanted to know what we can do to change our lifestyle around all this tech that is consuming our lives nowadays 24/7. We have to put some boundaries in place. We have to know what is right and what is wrong with how addicting and potentially damaging these devices are. And Michael has some big wisdom here as we dive into the concept of scarcity brain. So stand by for my conversation at Tough Fest 2024 with Michael Easter. Have you been on like any international trips recently?
Oh, I did the 50-mile ruck in Normandy for the 80th anniversary.
That was like 2 weeks ago, right?
2 weeks ago. 80th anniversary.
That's insane.
It was awesome. It was so awesome.
And there was actually American soldiers that went on that trip, right? That there's not a whole lot left.
They're all like 100.
And there's a handful of them still alive, correct?
Who came out, yeah. one of the guys that I was staying with at the Airbnb, he was on a flight with one of them. Sat next to one of them. He's like, the guy was 17 when he signed up for the military. D-Day happened a year later. So he was 18 when he got sent to, I think he got sent to Utah Beach. So the casualty rate of the first fleet that landed on Utah Beach was 60%.
6 out of 10.
Omaha Beach was 9 out of 10. Just a complete bloodbath.
That's nuts.
And just going there for that anniversary and doing the whole, so the ruck was, we started at, where did we start? We started at Utah Beach, went into a town called St. Mary Glace, which is where they dropped all the airborne guys before they, stormed the beaches. And then from there came down to MTNTOUGH and then just hung on the cliffs where the Rangers went up and went all the way down to Omaha Beach and back, and it ends up being about 50 miles. So it's rad.
That is rad.
Yeah.
Have you been there before?
Long time ago when I was like maybe 14, 15.
That's
Did a family vacation with my mom, but like under these circumstances, it was pretty powerful. And the place turns into basically an American state. I mean, everyone is from the U.S. and like people dress in World War II stuff. Like you get all these reenactors and there's like all these military exercises and stuff. So it was cool.
Yeah, I knew some guys that were jumping in
really?
wearing the old uniforms. And I think they try to do it every year on the date. But I knew this one was a big one.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Did you go with Go Ruck?
Yep, Go Ruck put on the event, and then I went with. There was a bunch of different groups. They had 150 people sign up for it, that was surprising to me because it's international. The distance is limiting,
Yeah.
right? And I thought at the start, it's funny. Jason from Go Ruck, he just looks at me and he goes, "Half of these people are gonna drop." He's like all fired up.
Still trying to crush them.
Yeah, he's all fired up, and 130 people finished it. 130.
Which is an excellent completion rate for a 50-mile ruck.
Yeah. And I think it's just the time, the place, the reason people are there. I mean, it just puts wind in your sails, So it was cool.
Yeah, at that place, in that environment, you're not going to want to ever quit.
Exactly.
That is awesome.
Yeah, it was rad.
I forgot you were just there. That's incredible.
Yeah, totally.
So, welcome back to the lab.
Thanks, dude.
Second year in a row for Tough Fest.
It was awesome, as always.
It was fun.
Yeah.
The energy yesterday, all day during the workout, it was really good. It was cool.
You guys have the fact that you can get that big of a group, not just the size, but then the people who come are also interesting, welcoming, passionate, cool. I mean, that says something about what you guys are doing. So congrats on that. It's rad, man. Keep it up.
Thanks, man. I think it's cool that like when a like-minded community gets together, the energy is off the charts. And we've noticed something unique, which is very related to your work. There is something unique about Mountain Toughers, which is really interesting because we train together at the Mountain Tough Lab. We have forever as a staff. And there's something incredibly motivating from training with a group of people that are pushing you, the community, the camaraderie, and the Mountain Tough content that we're building out of the Mountain Tough Lab goes into the app, and then customers all over the globe participate in different programs in the app. So a lot of them are doing minimal gear dailies or kettlebell diesel. But what we've found over the last couple of years is it's self-selecting this really unique individual that we never really thought about. Because if you live in Ohio and you find Mountain Tough, there's a really good chance now in modern day society that you could have driven 20 minutes to a Planet Fitness, a CrossFit gym. There's not many people that don't have that option. There are some rural that don't have that option, but most 8 out of 10 can drive into a local gym. Mm-hmm. But they're deciding not to for some reason. And they're training in their basements or in their garage completely alone. Some of them are doing it with a spouse, but most of them are completely alone. And so the individual that for whatever reason is making that decision, which is awesome that they're training with Mountain Tough, but they're making a decision to not go to that local CrossFit class. They're in a cold, dark basement turning play on the app and doing an MGD. Just from that aspect, there's like this pre-self-selection that happened. And then we're training them really hard through Mountain Tough. And so then when they all show up and you get to meet them in person from all over the country, it does this, it's like a really cool dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do think there's value in having training sessions where you're totally alone. Maybe it's in silence and you have very minimal outside stimulation and outside support, whether that be from other people, whether that be from music, whether that be from whatever it is. Because once you start to strip away the layers, you start to really find, what can I do when I have less?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a skill that is really important for a human, right? Self-reliance is ultimately, can I do this thing on my own without having to rely on externalities?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can figure out a way to program that into your life, whether it's with the Mountain Tough app alone in your garage when it's, 32 degrees out or whatever it might be, that's really powerful. And I think what it does is it sets, sets your adaptability. And then when you take a person who does that and you put them in this community, holy hell, that becomes exceedingly powerful.
Yeah.
Because I've gone from the garage alone in my head to like, now I have this big community. And so I think it makes the good times even better. Whereas if you're always chasing the good times, I always need these 5 people that I need to work out with, or I'm not going to work out. I always need my special playlist, or I'm not going to work out. And I need this drink when I work out, and I need this type of weight, right?
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden when that goes away, you fall apart.
You're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah. So you can really savor the good times if you program in some times that aren't as good.
And you always see that at Tough Fest, especially initially, because by design, we pair people with teammates they've never met and do not know.
I love that.
And at first, you can see that big eye moment where they're like, oh, I came with 2 buddies that are studs because we were here to win this thing. And you're like, no. You need to go with someone you never met. And at first, they're kind of mad at you. They're like, we've been planning all year we thought for sure we'd be on the same team. And you're like, no, because anyone can win with their 2 best friends. But we want to see who can lead a team, who can jump into a team with 2 people that they haven't met, regardless of fitness levels. Because it's not about winning at all. It's not, in no way is it about winning the Tough Fest workout. It's about the magic that happens when you have to instantly adapt your plan and figure out how you're going to communicate with these people you just met 5 minutes ago. And that is definitely creates some magic moments.
It works. And it builds bonds. So doing things that are challenging with people is what really brings people together, right? People don't really bond when the times are good. They do to a certain extent, but it's when times are hard and you have to work with others to solve problems, I think is what unites people the most. And there's probably good evolutionary reasons for that. But I'll tell you, for example, this year I show up and the people who were on my team last year were here. And I'm like, you guys, what's up? What's up? Right? I haven't talked to them since then, but it's like I see them and we immediately just hit it off. We catch up. Like we talk about last year's workout. We talk about how to go this year. We have all these things we're talking about, right? It was awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm going to come back and I'm going to see him next year and we're going to do the same thing. What's up? It's great.
That's pretty cool because it would be hard to create that bond that fast any other way.
Oh, yeah.
But adversity, like doing something hard with some other people, especially when you're kind of when you are pushing past your comfort zone and you're relying on your team, that creates that bond so fast.
Yeah, and I love how the workouts, how you and Sarah structure the workout so there's going to be elements where one person is going to be better, elements where another person is going to be better suited for whatever skill it might be. And so you as a team and a team member, you have to give some. You have to go, okay, well, I have to admit here that I'm not good at this movement.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you take that? We're going to strategize, but I am good at this. So I'll take that and we'll divvy this up. And so that sort of working together and thinking through problems, I think, is just super powerful for people.
Yeah. They have to check their ego a little bit, because if you try to win it on your own from an ego perspective, then you're going to crumble and fall apart, because you can't do it all on your own. You have to use the help of your two teammates, and there has to be a wise plan behind that, how you're going to work together.
Mm-hmm. And then when you see how you did, I'll give you a great example. Guy on my team last year, he was great at overhead pressing. Running, he was not so good.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw him this year, he told me, hey, dude, I've been running a lot more. I decided to do a 5K. He's like, last year's thing with the team, it showed me, running is my limitation, and I've put more time into running, and this year I did much better on the run.
That's
it's
awesome.
Like, that's awesome. You may not get, if you're alone, if you're like, okay, I'm at my house, I'm alone, I'm going to go for a 5K. You're like, I didn't do great. But is that going to incentivize you to go do it more? Maybe not. But I think that if there's that team element and you're like, that really kind of showed where I was lacking in a way that potentially negatively affected this group that I'm a part of, that I now care about, that incentivizes you to fix it.
I love that.
It's awesome.
I love that so much, because like a functional athlete, they need to think that way, because you have to bring up your greatest deficiency, because your greatest deficiency is going to cause the most problems. And you see that when people need to do all these runs at Tough Fest, it's usually a weak link. But if you just go back home and deadlift all the time, you're not bringing up that greatest deficiency to be like well-rounded, ready for anything that's going to come your way, whether it's travel, a trip, a hunt. You need to be kind of ready for anything.
Yeah, totally.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a second and talk to you about nutrition and supplementation. There are a plethora of options when it comes to supplements that can be kind of overwhelming, so I wanted to let you guys know what I do take. So in the mornings, I am taking the Mountain Ops greens and the collagen right when I wake up, and that has been a game changer. I don't eat a lot of vegetables throughout the day, so adding those greens in the morning is quick and efficient, and I can really feel the collagen. In addition, I do enhance my workouts. My Mountain Tough training sessions are quite difficult, and so I do like to take the Enduro. It gives you a cardio enhancement that you can actually feel. And then I also like a little caffeine with my workout, so I'm taking the Mountain Ops Ignite. Lastly, it's really important that you are getting enough protein and recovering after these difficult sessions. What I do know is even following a strict whole foods diet, I'm not getting nearly enough protein on most days unless I take a supplement. So I do take the Mountain Ops protein after my workout to make sure that I'm hitting about 1 gram per body weight for a functional athlete. So taking the Mountain Ops protein with some creatine after my workouts has been huge. Those are the products I am taking and that I recommend. The Mountain Ops team is giving Mountain Tough podcast show listeners an exclusive discount to their products. It is a great deal. So for a first-time purchase on mountainops.com, you do get 20% off. All you need to do is go to mountainops.com and then use the code MountainTough at checkout. That's MTNTOUGH, all caps, all one word. Apply that as your promo code at checkout, and you're going to get 20% off your first order. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. I wanted to dive in to Scarcity Brain from a few different perspectives. I've been a huge fan of Comfort Crisis for a long time, and Mountain Tough applies many of the principles in your work there throughout what we do, and then even just in like my own family, in my own life. the scarcity brain topic, I want to unpack pretty heavily because it is, in my mind, more like dangerous to us and dangerous to, especially if I think about like my family and my kids, because of its prevalence. It's much more difficult once you understand the principles to put a few more parameters in your life to stay in a better spot from a scarcity brain perspective. It makes me think that I need to be like a little bit more hyper vigilant, where because I'm so kind of obsessed with adventure that I feel like I'm doing okay on the comfort crisis thesis, but the scarcity brain thesis has me pretty freaked out.
Yeah. We should all be freaked out.
I was hoping you could comfort me a little bit on the scarcity brain, but I don't think it's there.
Well, yeah. So the book, for those who aren't familiar, it looks at this idea of why can't humans seem to get enough? Right? It's like everyone knows that everything is fine in moderation, and yet we all suck at moderation in a lot of ways. And it looks at why that is. And what's unique about this moment in time is that, for all of time, humans never had enough of what we really needed to survive and thrive with. So everything from food to stuff to information to the number of people we could influence, all these things that were necessary for survival, never had enough of them. So we evolved to crave those things. And when we got the opportunity to get them, to overdo them, right? For all of time, if you're a hunter-gatherer and you come upon a big, a beehive, you're going to eat all the honey in the hive. Still today, hunter-gatherers will gorge themselves on honey to the point where they're sick because you want to pack on weight, right? Because you never have enough food.
You want to survive.
You want to survive. But that's with everything. That's with possessions. That's with trying to get information because that would give you a survival advantage. But very recently, in the grand scheme of time, all these things that we need to survive, they've become abundant. So on the food example, it's like we throw out about a third of our food, and more than 70% of the country is either overweight or obese. From the information standpoint, a person today now sees more information in one day than someone in the 1400s would have seen in their entire life.
One day.
One day.
That's insane.
I mean, think about it. Like, think of what's at the palm of your hand with the internet. Think about even when you drive, you have the radio on.
Podcasts.
You're going past billboards that are containing sales information. Like, there's just so much. Possessions. So even in the 1800s, the average home would have, a few tools they needed to survive. You had some cookware. Mm-hmm. You had the tools you needed to do your job. Probably your job was in farming, agriculture. You didn't have much. And now the average home has 10,000 to 50,000 items on average. And even within the last, say, 10 years, how we shop and the accessibility of getting things has gone through the roof.
Amazon,
right?
2-day shipping.
Yeah, it used to be that you would even the act of having to go down to the store in your car, to the Kmart or the Walmart, wherever, that was a little bit of a delay, right? But now it's like you get a thought, I could use a new blender. Bam, new blender's on the way, right?
So fast.
You can fulfill that impulse, even if it's rational or not. And on and on and on. And same with status, right? It's like before people lived in groups that were probably no bigger than 150 people, and you had a really good sense of who people were. You knew your place in things. And now the internet, it's like you can have millions of followers on a social media platform and influence them. And really, status is this thing that gives us a survival advantage, and we want more of it. But now it's been quantified with likes and follower counts and put on this big, grand pedestal. So things have very much changed, and I don't think that we're necessarily adapted to handle all of this. I'm not saying these things are inherently bad, right? This is a result of progress. Mm-hmm. But I think that we can overdo things. And you look at a lot of our problems today and personal problems that people have, whether that be debt, well, it's because you probably buy too much. And maybe the reason you buy stuff is because of status, right? You're like, I need that car. It's very easy for people to overconsume food. I mean, in the comfort crisis, I also talk about how we don't move enough too.
Yeah.
So like you're overconsuming, but you're under burning. Information. People can go down these crazy internet rabbit holes that just drive them insane. I mean, you look at some of the ideas that people come up with today and you're like, well, where the hell did you hear that?
The rabbit holes are insane.
The rabbit holes. Yeah. And so it's just a strange time it's an amazing time to be alive. I do think it's the best time to be alive, but it's also a strange time to be alive, and you have to think about how to navigate that. So the book looks into that. And I think another really interesting thing about today is that we have corporations have unprecedented access to information, telling them what is going to make us tick and do the thing that they want to do. So a lot of the book focuses on this idea of the scarcity loop, which is this 3-part behavior loop that I kind of stumbled upon while investigating slot machines in Las Vegas. I went into like this casino laboratory. It's literally like this working casino that's funded by big tech companies in the casino industry.
Yeah, I loved that part of the book where that guy explains how this is making it addictive.
Yeah. And so it's 3 parts basically. It's opportunity, unpredictable rewards, quick repeatability. So I'll give you the analogy of a slot machine. Opportunity, you have an opportunity to win money. Unpredictable rewards, you know if you repeat the behavior, at some point you will get something that's valuable, right? But you don't know when, you don't know how valuable it's going to be. So with a slot machine, it's like you play the game, you could win some money, but on any given game you could lose. You could win a little, or you could win enough that you're like, I'm retiring. And then third is quick repeatability. You can immediately repeat the behavior. Yeah. Just keep playing the game. When that system got really dialed in slot machines, this was about the 80s, casino revenues just exploded. Slot machines went from making not too much to making up 85% of casino revenues. And so they now make more money. This is a crazy stat, and it makes me sad because I'm an author. Slot machines make more money than books, movies, and music combined.
Jeez, that's why they're in gas stations.
That's why they're in gas stations, in Vegas, like grocery stores, airport. When I get off my flight today in Vegas,
they're everywhere.
Everywhere. But what happened is that a lot of tech companies saw what was happening in Vegas. They go, ooh, people will sit and do this thing over and over and over, even though everyone knows the house always wins. Right? You play a slot machine long enough, you're going to lose. It's just math, right? That's how the numbers work. So this system, which I call the scarcity loop, it gets put in things like social media. It's really what makes social media work, right? You got an opportunity for whether it be likes or some piece of information that makes you feel something, but you don't know when you're going to get it. Right? If you post,
it's a gamble.
You could get 2 likes and you're like, oh man, that sucks. People don't like me. Or you could go viral and oh my gosh, this is the most amazing thing ever. You check and recheck all day.
And then you got the infinite scroll.
Infinite scroll, just keep going. Yep. It's being put in different financial apps. It's what makes dating apps work. Heard from the guy who invented Tinder. And he's literally like, yeah, you just like make it a slot machine. That's why it took off. All these different places. Sports betting, I mean, all over. And kind of anywhere you put this thing, I think it does a really good job at grabbing people's attention, holding it, and getting them to make decisions that they perhaps otherwise wouldn't. So it's not necessarily a good or bad thing. It's just depending on where it gets placed and how it gets used. And I think today it's just getting used in ways that lead people to do things that they might regret.
So scary because it's everywhere. And one thing that I've noticed is it is addictive and a problem from my life experience, regardless of your age. Because I went through a thought process for a while with my daughter. So I have an 11-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old daughter. And I'm kind of like hyper vigilant on what's going to happen with how much tech we let them use and don't use, and how my wife and I are managing that. And one thing that has been eye-opening to me this year is I'm always kind of overwatching that to the best of my ability with my daughters. And you would think that like I need to talk to them about that, phones and the scarcity loop with them and what's going to happen at school with other friends with phones, what's going to happen with gymnastics with other phones. But one thing that's been really interesting to me this year is when like the grandparents come over, they're scrolling more than like we are and our friends are, because we kind of are living in this world. And so I'm having to talk to like my parents about like, hey, you can't just let my kids be on your phone all the time, because we don't really do that at our house. And now it's driving me nuts because you're here and they're on your phone. And then, so that has been like this really weird, awkward conversation, because you have to tell your dad, hey, don't hand, or your mom, we don't want our kids on your phone. And so that's been awkward. And then I found that like they're on it all the time too, and like on Facebook or something. And so this addiction, because a lot of time in mainstream media, it's talked about like younger people and kids and how we're going to protect them from the scarcity loop on technology. But it has been clear to me over the last year that it is overwhelming addictive regardless of your age, just like any other addiction.
Totally. Yeah, I think it absolutely is. And you look at the numbers and they're all pretty much similar for a lot of different age groups. And you're seeing the numbers creep up in older people. And I think what the big question why we focus on younger people though is that younger people are more at risk of addiction. They have a harder time framing the consequences, or rather, I guess I would say the stakes of something like social media, right? So if I'm 37, if someone goes on my Instagram page and they leave a comment that says, you look like an idiot, I can just go, okay, But if you're 17, that actually affects people. And there's a reason the kids' brains basically change from puberty to about 25, but especially from that like 13 to 18, 20. And at this point in a person's life, a lot of things are happening. One of the big important things is that being social and getting a social network becomes more important than any other point in a person's life. They're also more sensitive to social cues. So you put them on a platform that is social and it literally quantifies, it puts a score on how cool you are. That's not a good thing.
That's dangerous.
It's not a good thing. Yeah. And this is the same for exposure to any potentially addictive behavior or substance. So here's a good stat. If a person starts drinking has their first drink at 14, they have a 50-50 shot at becoming an alcoholic. If they wait until 21, it's only 10%. And that's simply
big.
It's big. And it's simply because the way the brain changes, it's figuring out social stuff. It's also figuring out, okay, how do I find sort of like comfort and escape? How do I deal with my problems? And a lot of addictive behaviors and substances, whether it be escaping into the cell phone anytime you feel bad, whether it be, I have a drink or something, you're figuring that out at those ages. So if you can delay a lot of the stuff that does have a higher likelihood of being addictive, phones to a certain extent, depending on what the app is, substances, things like that, that's probably a good thing.
What are your thoughts on the peer pressure bullying that could come out as the result of being like a parent that says, hey, we're going to be the weird family. If you're at school as like a 16-year-old girl and you have 100 kids in your class now, 99 of them are going to have a phone and you're not going to have a phone.
It's hard, man. It's hard. Because it's almost like smoking in the sense that like, if I smoke in this room, you're still going to get my secondhand smoke.
That's what I was wondering about. Yeah.
So that's kind of what social media is like, where it's like, if all your friends are on it, some of the ripple effects still affect the person who's not on it. Which is unfortunate. I think probably schools are going to have to figure out some things. I know some schools are doing like the phone bags that block them. I think there's probably going to have to be, as much as I'm like the type of person who isn't always in favor of legislating everything. I mean, I do think maybe there's an argument that we should make sure social media companies are ensuring that people are a certain age before they can join. Yeah, there's a lot of things out there. There's a guy whose name is Jonathan Haidt who talks a lot about this. There's a book, I forget the name of his book, but yeah, he's got a lot of good ideas around it that I mostly agree with. And I think it's one of those things, like you get people who are, who will argue against it, and they'll be like, well, the data says this and that and that. But I think a very simple test is like, go up and ask anyone, do you want to spend more time on your phone? Every single person is like, I use my phone too much and I don't like it. Mm-hmm. It's like, what more data do we need?
You can feel it.
Yeah. Everyone's saying the same damn thing. So why do we have to like over intellectualize this? Let's just try and solve the problem.
Is the research indicating that the addictions we have to our phone is the same addiction we would have to drugs or alcohol? Is it the same psychological impact? Well,
I think that it depends on how you define addiction. In my point of view, I basically define addiction as simply like any behavior that hurts you in the long term. You're getting reward or escape in the short term, but is then affecting you in the long run. So that means it's really a spectrum though, right? So like there's all these kinds of behaviors we do every day that sort of fall into that spectrum, but it's like not that big of a deal. It really becomes when you're consistently taking this short-term reward over and over and over, and it's really impacting you in the long run. So it's like, a drug addict, you might look at it makes sense from the person who's addicted's point of view. That's something that I think we often miss. So if you think of like a drug addict, let's say you have a heroin addict, and you're like, why the hell would you do that? Like that doesn't make any sense. Well, for them, it solves their problems in the short term, right? They may have some trauma that happened to them that helps them deal with it. I mean, even if they don't do drugs, they're going to feel bad. So if they use drugs in the short term, like it's rational because it's fixing their problem. Only in the short term though. And in the long term, it's causing all these bigger damages. And so I think that's kind of how I think of addiction. Now, of course, certain things are going to be worse than others. I think arguably drugs are going to be worse than cell phones, right? But at the same time, neither are good. And it's kind of like, I don't know. And not all people, what I think is interesting about cell phones too, is that like everyone is overdoing them. Whereas with a lot of things,
that's what makes it unique. Yeah. It's not a subset of the population.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, people, like when we were in elementary school, we used to get told like, if you do a drug one time, you're going to get addicted and you're going to live on the street. Well, that's not actually true. Like there's really interesting research that shows that even people they'll take like people and give them basically heroin. And they find that about a third of the people like heroin. They're like, that was great. A third of the people are like, I don't know. Like maybe I just don't want to mess with it. A third of the people hate it. They absolutely hate it. And so then what happens is if that third of the people who like it continue to do it, I think it's about 15% of them will get addicted to it. I could have the numbers wrong, but it ends up being like a 6% addiction rate. So really like not everyone gets addicted to different substances.
Possibly genetic,
possibly environmental, all these things. But what's fascinating about cell phones is like everyone probably uses their cell phone too much. It's just like how much is too much for that person, right?
That is really interesting. Yeah. Because you don't have a subset, and you don't have the in your face obvious ramifications of phone addiction that you would of drug addiction. So if someone is on heroin at work, it's going to be obvious to you and all the other people in that work environment of that addiction causing damage, where phones, the damage could be much more hidden.
Yeah. And the other thing is like, you kind of have to use a cell phone today. You need Google Maps. Literally, you have to have a cell phone to get on an airplane now, right? Yeah. So you have it, but it also has these parts of it that are, it would be like if every time you eat, you had to do heroin, right? It's like, well, of course we'd have some people that get addicted to it. So I think that's the part of the thing is like, we have this thing that has clear utility with things like Google, with things like Onyx Hunt, right?
Yeah.
With things like the MTNTOUGH app.
True. Yeah.
So there are these really amazing things about cell phones. The question is just like, we have all these other aspects of it that are built to be addictive and take your time and attention, more or less. And it's really balancing those. So like, if someone's listening to this podcast, if you look at what your screen time is, I can guarantee probably the things that you're overdoing have that element of the scarcity loop woven in, unless you're on the Mountain Tough app. And I hope you are. And then you're going to have like your 60-minute workout every day.
Then you're out.
And then you're good. Yeah.
Well, let's go into solutions and what we can do. And I know that it's not just technology, it's not just phones. The same scarcity loop is hitting us on a possessions perspective and a food perspective. Mm-hmm. But what should we be thinking about to start putting some boundaries up around our lives to do the best we can in this environment of abundance?
Yeah.
I've used a ton of Bluetooth speakers over the years, and they all have never quite had enough output for me to really have an awesome home gym workout on a Bluetooth speaker. But the Turtle Box is in a whole new ball game. They have leveled up this product, so the bass and the output you get out of a Turtle Box is quite amazing. It's funny how we started using them at the lab. We had an awesome sound system at our new lab here in Bozeman. We were using it so much, we actually blew our brand new system out. We went right to the Turtle Boxes. And so we paired two together in the lab. And that was a lot of output for the Mountain Tough team and all of our testing to have phenomenal sound in our gym for a great workout with great music. We know there's a ton of Mountain Toughers training in their basements, in their garages, and I know a lot of you are looking for great sound to play some music in the background to your MGDs. This is a great product for you to check out. Turtle Box is at a whole new level. The bass and the volume you can get out of that box. It's a sweet product. You guys can check them out at turtleboxaudio.com. Use promo code TOUGH for a free Turtlebox hat with the purchase of a Gen 2 speaker. The hat must be added to your cart before entering the promo code TOUGH, TOUGH. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast.
I think first of all is just being aware that, so to back up, the reason that we're attracted to the scarcity loop, and people who are hunters will love this, is that loop is embedded in hunting. It evolved, like we have this natural attraction to it because when you think about hunters and gatherers going out for food, it's the same exact system, right? You go to a place, you don't know if it's going to have food. Oh, it doesn't have food. So you go to the next place. Oh, it doesn't have food. You go to the next place. Oh my God, it has food, right? Ding, 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 jackpot.
Get it all.
And then you have to repeat that day to day. So we're kind of like attracted to that system. I think that being aware that your brain is naturally attracted to that sort of scarcity loop system, just being aware of like, oh, that's why I get so obsessed over social media, or that's why I constantly want the next possession. It's like this random reward thing, right? I think just being aware of it can help alter some behaviors. Mm-hmm. That's this thing called the observer effect, where just by observing a behavior and becoming aware of it, it tends to change. I think probably most effective though today, I think what's really pushed people into excess is the third part, which is the quick repeatability or the speed at which you can do things. So a good example here is food. So I talked to this guy who's like a executive at junk food companies. And he basically said, if you want a junk food to sell a lot, it's got to have 3 V's. It's got to have value. It's got to have variety. It's got to have velocity. It's the same exact thing as a scarcity loop. It's just put in 3 V's.
Different words.
And when you look at when people eat ultra processed food, so food that gets highly processed, they tend to eat it quicker. And because of that, they tend to eat a lot more calories over the day.
Like chips,
stuff like that, right? And so people who eat ultra processed food end up eating about 500 calories more a day simply because the food is much faster to eat. And so you've eaten too much once you realize you're full. When you put people on a diet of unprocessed food, their eating slows down and they therefore tend to eat less and they spontaneously lose weight. Not to mention that food also tends to be more dense in micronutrients and nutrition and all these good things.
Yeah.
So look, there's a million diets out there. And if it's a weight loss diet, they all work because they lead you to eat less, right? Low carb, we'll eat fewer carbs. Okay, so eat less.
Yeah.
Right? Low fat, we'll eat lower fat. Okay, so eat less. Right? It's just a mechanism that gets pulled to get you to eat less.
Knocking your input down.
Yeah. So I think that if you just focus your diet on foods that have one ingredient, like rice, vegetables, potatoes, meat, all these things, that tends to lead people to be healthier. As part of the book, I went to the jungle in Bolivia because there's this tribe down there who doesn't die of heart disease. And heart disease is what kills modern Americans. So like, if you're listening to this right now, you have about a coin flip's chance of dying of heart disease. It's crazy.
That's crazy.
And we don't pay attention to it, right? It's just like this thing that's there though. And this tribe does not die of heart disease. They have the healthiest hearts ever recorded by science. So I go down there and spend some time with them. And most of the reason goes back to what they eat. And what they eat is all just this stuff that's just one ingredient. They're eating rice, they're eating chicken, they're eating vegetables, they're eating fruit, and they're not slathering all kinds of crap on it when they eat it, right? And it's just that's those simple meals. I mean, that's what humans evolved to eat. And now we have, Doritos with 75 different ingredients and just say whatever the flavor is, right? The junk food guy said you got to have variety.
Yeah.
Right. There's like 75 different Doritos out there.
So many Doritos.
So many of everything. And so I think that that's a pretty simple way. But then when we think about speed with possessions, like I mentioned with Amazon, it's like you can just go and make a purchase immediately. You can be home and bored. And I guarantee everyone's done this. I've done it. Where you're just online, kind of like in between work, you're a little bit bored. Oh man, that's a sweet new piece of Sitka gear or Stone Glacier gear, and you end up buying it really quick. Maybe you need it, but a lot of times we get stuff that we don't actually need, right?
Especially that low cost. Like if you think about the Instagram ad items, like a blender jet type thing. Yeah. You're like, oh, it's $40. It's on sale.
It's on sale.
And then your debit card, your credit card's hooked to your phone. And so you don't even have to pull it out of your wallet. You can just double click and see that blender jet in 2 days.
Yeah. So I think slowing down that process, one recommendation I give people is if you want to buy something online, set a rule to keep it in your cart for at least 3 days. I guarantee your purchasing will plummet.
It's ironic because yesterday some really good friends of mine were out in the Tough Fest workout. And there was a husband-wife, and she actually was talking about that. And that was the first time I had thought about that. And they were arguing over it a little bit. But there was some things that she needed. She was talking about building out her home gym. And she has a 48-hour principle on her cart. And the husband was like, man, if it's in my cart, I'm buying. And she said how much she loved it. Because she said the 48-hour principle in the cart, there are so many times, she said like 75% of the time, she does not end up buying that item. And then she only ends up buying items with that principle that she is actually really glad she got. She actually probably needed them more, and she didn't get all that buyer's remorse just from just letting it sit in that cart.
Yeah. It works. And I think a lot of this kind of gets to like the bigger why is I think a lot of the things we do that we maybe later regret, we're doing that thing to solve for boredom or we're stressed out at work. And so buying the Amazon thing or eating the Doritos or whatever, going on this crazy internet social media binge solves that short-term stress, solves the short-term boredom, but it's a way that solves it that has long-term consequences. And I think learning to live well is figuring out how can I do things that are going to have long-term upsides. And it may be hard in the short term. You may have to sit with your boredom. It's going to suck. But from that, you often get good ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of going, okay, I'm stressed, Instagram, sit with the stress and ask, well, why am I stressed in the first place? Could I solve that problem so I don't just, every time I feel stressed, I just go on Instagram or I just buy something? Instead, I go, oh, I figured out the underlying root of the problem. I fixed the problem. Now my life's better overall. Because if you're doing the opposite, you're just Band-Aiding it. You're just putting on all kinds of Band-Aids every single time. Those Band-Aids aren't helping you in the long term. They're actually hurting you.
And it's very wild how much it is connected to comfort crisis. Because, and you talked about it last night, and you talk about it in the book of how amazing you felt coming home from trips in the wilderness. And it's because a big part of that, there's a lot going on for sure. I mean, you're getting the vitamin D, you're getting the movement, you're getting the beauty of the wilderness, you're getting some camaraderie, and you're probably getting a little bit healthier food. But a massive, massive part for me of being in the wilderness is you are eliminating most of the scarcity loop out of your life. Mm-hmm. And we talk about it all the time in Mountain Tough. We can see it on each other. I can almost see it on Mountain Tough team members. You can feel it when they pull in the parking lot if they've been out in the mountains for 3 days. The energy difference for people compared to not being in the mountains, being just, a normal weekend versus a backcountry hunt for a lot of us. And Weston jokes about it with me all the time. He's like, man, you come back from the mountains so fired up. And a big part of that is a lot of the scarcity loop can't get you out there. Mm-hmm. Limited service. Maybe you're not using your phone at all. And you are moving all day. You're not worried about an abundance of possessions. You're not shopping on the internet. And so part of the solution for sure has to be getting outside more.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the solution is, what have humans done for all of time? And it's like, for most of the time, we lived outdoors. We were active outdoors, and we had to put in effort to live. And I think the more that we can recreate that, I think you tend to find it makes people happier. We know it makes you healthier. Mm-hmm. There's plenty of evidence that it makes people mentally healthier. I mean, this is like kind of getting back into what humans are meant to do. And, I'm not suggesting anyone go live off the grid for the rest of their life. But I do think having times where you insert nature, insert effort as you're out in nature into your life is going to be good for you in the long term. There's a study I love while I was reporting Comfort Crisis. I talked to this guy who's a psychologist, and he does studies on pigeons. And this dude can basically turn a pigeon into a degenerate gambler. Okay? So he's got all these pigeons. He keeps them in these little pigeon cages in the lab, and he puts them in this cage where they pick between two games. Both games give them food, but the first game, they peck a light, and every other peck, they get like 15 pellets of food. It's a predictable amount of food. The second game, they peck the light, but about every fifth peck at random intervals, they get food, but they get a little more food. So they get 20 units. Now, if you do the math on this, it makes way more sense to play the first game. You're going to get way more food per peck.
Yep.
And there's entire theories called optimal foraging theories that basically say all animals are going to put in as little effort as they can to get the most amount of food. So that would tell us that they should all be picking game one. He puts the pigeons in the cage. 97% of them play the gambling game, where it's like this it's designed like a slot machine.
Even a pigeon.
But here's where it gets interesting. He'll take the same pigeons, and they'll build this giant cage for them. So instead of the small cages where they're alone, they're kind of cooped up, they build this giant cage. And they make it like the world they would live in if they were pigeons out in the wild. There's like trees, there's big logs, there's like places where they can build roosts. They're there with other pigeons. They're going and they're foraging for their food. They're doing all this stuff a pigeon would do in the wild. Then he puts those pigeons back into the game. Every single pigeon plays game one, the smart game. So it's like, well, why is that? And he told me that there's this idea called the optimal stimulation theory. And it basically states that all species need a certain amount of stimulation in their life. And if we don't get it, we go searching for it elsewhere. So in the past, humans would get stimulation just by living out in the wild, right? We were hunting, we were gathering, we were doing hard things every day. We had to deal with the elements. We were working together as a team. We were united in community. And now, in a way, we're a lot like the pigeons in the small cages, where we don't have all that. And so we go searching for stimulations. We gamble, we drink, we spend too much time on our phones, whatever it might be. You see this in all animals. And I think it's just one of those things that just cements it, that really kind of cemented it for me.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you need to get out into the wild and do things that humans are designed to do, or else you're going to be like a gambling pigeon.
That is insane that it's even impacting a pigeon brain.
Yeah.
Mountain Tough is the fitness app trusted by the dedicated. Mountain Tough ethos is backed by, we've always wanted to be the best in the world at helping our customers become more mentally tough. So inside the Mountain Tough app, you're not only going to find all of our physical training programs, but you're going to find additional training as well so that you can stay sharp physically, mentally, spiritually, and nutritionally. The Mountain Tough app also allows you to train no matter where you are, anytime, anywhere. Additionally, the Mountain Tough app is going to have programs from beginners all the way up to elite athletes. And all of our programming is structured in a way that you can start with no gear at body weight, and you can go all the way up to programming that is full gear. So you can do that in a robust home gym or your local gym. There's no excuse for you not to start today. With Mountain Tough, you can conquer your goals with the ideal program for your lifestyle and schedule. Train with equipment or just your body weight on your phone, tablet, TV, or web browser. Most importantly, Mountain Tough will help you train your mindset so you are always ready for anything life throws your way. Mountain Tough is offering the Mountain Tough podcast listeners an incredible offer. 6 weeks free on the Mountain Tough app. All you need to do is use the code MTNPOD to redeem your 6 weeks of training. That'll be a 14-day free trial plus a whole additional 4 weeks of training. Just go to mountaintough.com and enter code MTNPOD for your 6 weeks free on the best-in-class physical and mental training app. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. So personally for you, I know you have to have a lot of information, communications, especially this year with the book launch, with your newsletter, with your travel, with everything that you're doing. It's not like you can not have a phone and you have a digital newsletter and a subscription. So you're immersed in this world just as much as everyone listening. What personally has worked for you from a technology perspective to help with this stuff?
Yeah. I'd say 2 things. I think I try and go outside and do something every day. That helps a lot. I'll usually go on a walk every day outdoors, and I'll just leave my phone at home, or I just won't bring it, put it on airplane mode or something. Just getting outside, I think, is really good for people. It puts things in perspective. And then there's also for the apps that I just am like, I just want to limit my time on them. There's a app called ClearSpace, and these guys reached out to me after they'd read some of my work, and they're like, hey, they're 20 something years old. They're like, hey, we created this app and it'll help you use apps less. And I like, at first I roll my eyes. I'm just like, I got to use an app to use another app less. Come on.
How much do I have to use this app?
Yeah. But I downloaded it and I try it. And what it does is you select an app you want to limit. And once you want to go into that, you click it and it asks, do you want to use this app? A lot of times you might say no. You're like, no, I just reflexively did it.
Yeah.
So then if you want to use it, you say yes, and it goes, all right. And it takes you spend 10 seconds to like breathe in and breathe out. Then it shows you this nice quote. And then it says, how long do you want to use the app? You can pick 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, which is important because a lot of times we go into our phones and we go, I just got to respond to one message. And then you're down the rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah.
And then you pick your time. You can open the app and it kicks you out once you're done with your time. That's been awesome for me. Because it not only at first, it was like, it just taught me like, okay, I have to pause for this. I can't just reflexively dive into this. But then over time, I found myself like not even opening the app because I didn't want to be there. And when you look at how this ClearSpace app works, it really leans on interrupting the scarcity loop. It adds time and pause and intentionality because I think nowadays we use these things in such a way where it's just like reflexive, right? You're in a line.
It's the same as the shopping cart.
Yeah.
48-hour rule.
Yeah.
You got to get that pause in there.
Yeah. So that's been super helpful. We did on the newsletter, 2% newsletter, we did a ClearSpace 2% challenge. So those guys like partnered up with us and we had like this leaderboard and people would pick how many minutes they wanted to spend in the apps they had banned and all. It was awesome.
Dang.
Yeah.
You know, your 2% statistic, how powerful that was because how much clarity it just adds that instant clarity. So 2% of Americans will take the stairs when an escalator is available. I think we need a statistic similar to that on how many dudes don't take their phone into the bathroom versus dudes that do. Because the amount of, like with the scarcity loop in mind, the amount of dudes you see that like go into the bathroom for like 45 minutes with their phone. If you just eliminated that out of your life, like the amount of stuff you could get done. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty wild. Just
crazy.
The time suck.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yep. That's how it goes.
So how's the newsletter been going?
It's good. Dude, I love writing it. So it goes out 3 times a week. Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. Friday is always a fun themed post. So first Friday of the month we do it's called Burn the Ships. It's a workout. You guys collaborated on one with me. It was awesome. People loved it. Second Friday of the month is always gear, not stuff. So it's a gear roundup. Gear, not stuff is this concept I write about in Scarcity Brain and how to think about possessions, right? You should be buying gear. Gear is an item that we use intentionally for a higher purpose that allows us to achieve some higher purpose. Whereas stuff is just, right, fills a space, like gives you a cheap thrill, and then it's done. Third Friday of the month is this post I call the Expedition. It's basically like the coolest stuff I found online, most interesting ideas. We deal with a lot of stats. It's like I find a lot of really fascinating stuff that like can't be a full post. So I just bring it all together into this super fun thing. And then last Friday of the month is a Q&A where people can just ask me any question about whatever, and I'll go down the rabbit hole. And then the Monday and Wednesday posts are usually kind of grappling with big ideas and health and wellness and making sure to always end the emails with, here's how you actually use this, you know, in your life. So it's been awesome. Like when I started writing it, it's like, I felt like I walked into it thinking I was writing for people.
Yeah. It's helping yourself.
Kind of shouting into this internet. And what I realized as more people joined on and the comment section came alive and I started to actually know the readers, I realized I was writing it with them. So the comments, like, they guide what I read. They change my thinking. Like, it's an awesome little community, and I started, I was like, well, I'll try this. I'll see if it works for a little while. And I was just like, it took off and it's been super rewarding. It's honestly, it's one of the most fun things I've ever done.
Yeah, people are starving for this information, I think, because we do feel it. We feel the ramifications of what we should not be doing, but we don't know exactly what we should be doing. And the 2% newsletter helps so much with those nuggets. And and it's practical nuggets that you can apply.
Mm-hmm. That's a big part of my thinking is, I came up in big media magazines, and I found that, over time, the economics of traditional magazines like Men's Health and Outside, it's just changed. And now the websites they're not that useful, right? It's kind of just like, it's not great stuff.
Yep.
But on the other hand, we're kind of in a place now where the internet allows people to go so far down the rabbit hole, especially with like health and wellness, with like, compounds and biomarkers and all this stuff. And it's interesting, but I just don't think it's as practical as is useful, right? I think like I try and take a big picture look and be like, okay, what is going to give people the highest return on their time, energy, money invested?
Mm-hmm.
And let's talk about that. Let's boil things down to like, what do I actually need to do? Because it's easy to get distracted by the shiny, super sciencey things, whether or not they actually move the dial. Mm-hmm. And I think if you look at like sort of big picture, human health, human wellness, I don't think they do.
Yeah.
And so I try and just get it real practical, which is why I love what you guys are doing, because move more, move with intentionality, have a purpose behind it, build a community behind it, suffer a little bit in your 32 degree garage alone, and then come to Tough Fest. And it's like, it's beautiful.
Do you have any plans to get the 2% community together in person?
I've done small events. We started doing this event that I call the Don't Die event. We did one in this last spring. We're going to do one in the fall. We'll probably run 2 a year. And it's small. It's 25 people, but it's awesome. So it's me and one of my best friends who was in the CIA in Iraq for a long time in the Middle East, Syria, places like that. And we kind of teach people urban survival paired with fitness, wellness. So this big theme of like, don't die.
Yeah.
And so you're going to learn, it's all this stuff that I've had to learn traveling into conflict zones, into dangerous places around the world, and stuff that he obviously had to learn as a CIA operative.
That is awesome.
In there. So it's a lot of urban, like how to get out of handcuffs. How do you talk to someone? How do you get across a border? What happens? Like if you're at a hotel, what floor should you stay on? What's the safest floor in a hotel? And what should you do if something goes wrong at a hotel? How should you travel through a city? How do you get out of a city? How do you train to be able to move across ground covering stuff quickly, right? All these important things that I think people often don't think about. And so
that is awesome.
We deep dive. It's awesome. We do it out in the desert. It's super cool, man. So,
how do folks get signed up for one of those?
We're going to be blasting stuff out about it on the newsletter. So the newsletter is at twopct.com, and we'll have a whole landing page and all that stuff. So
that'll be big. Those are big. I mean, that type
it's a rad event.
That information is so helpful. Just that awareness.
Yeah. And people, it's interesting. It started because the stuff in Israel happened, right? That was October 6th. And a lot of tech workers have to travel to Israel. This is a big tech hub. And, if you're there on October 5th and then the crap hits the fan on the 6th, then you don't know what to do. Like, you're screwed. And so we had this big bank that does a lot of funding for tech in Silicon Valley. They hired us to give this, basically walk people through this who were like leaders of banks who had to do a lot of traveling to get them prepared. And we were like, hey, we should do this for everyone.
That is awesome.
Super powerful. So it's cool.
That's changing lives for sure.
Yeah, it was rad.
Well, in closing, I wanted to let you know that I did get to see this year a pretty cool case study of the technology scarcity loop getting kind of removed. My nephew, he's had a rough couple years, and he is 16, and he'd been arrested a couple times, and he had struggled with getting in a tremendous amount of trouble, some drugs, some alcohol. And he ended up going to, my dad helped him get into this place that's been around for 50 years. It's connected to the Department of Defense, but it's called Montana Youth Academy. And so he went there for 6 months, and they completely removed all technology. So about 50 kids for a 6-month semester, all in that 14, 16, 17, 18-year-old age range. And as soon as they get there, there's no tech and no caffeine, no nicotine. And he was only allowed to call my sister once a week on a landline for 5 minutes. If other than that, they could write letters. Handwritten letters can go back and forth. And at first, it was painful, and they warned our family that it was going to be a rough couple weeks at first, because you're removing a lot of addiction, kind of like a detox scenario. And it was exactly how they described, where kids are calling, begging to come home, and they're really hyping up how bad it is there. And then it just kind of smoothed out in the middle of that 6 months and went kind of quiet. And he actually he'll graduate tomorrow. So he graduates tomorrow to finish up his 6 months. And
Awesome.
He was able to visit family once the week before graduation. So I got to see him last week. And it was insane. He's like a completely different kid. Not only, well, first I'll start with like physically, he's like completely jacked and cut. And he's always been tall for his age and a little big, but he looks like an NFL linebacker right now. And even like he's got like the square jaw now. And they were just rucking outside every morning and then lifting weights every single afternoon. So outdoors every day, no technology, whole foods. But like the physical stuff was cool, but like mentally, like seeing him walk in here with this like huge smile on his face, it was so awesome. And so much of it after this conversation, it's like that scarcity loop was, from a technology perspective, completely removed, was a big, big part of that.
Yeah. And I think that's the story of all growth. You're going to have the short term that's terrible, those first 2 weeks, the 3 weeks, the month, the whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's going to be awful. But you just got to recognize that that's because you're growing. That's because good things are about to happen. Mm-hmm. And then on the other side of that, you get this giant, giant upswing. And it's so worth it. I love hearing that, especially because I was a kid who was similar to him.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate you as always.
Yeah, always, man. I appreciate you having me here. Thanks for putting on Tough Fest. It's awesome. Keep it up.
Thanks for what you're doing. Yeah, you're changing lives too.
Thanks, dude.
Thanks, man. What an amazing conversation with Michael Easter. He always brings so much wisdom. I love chatting with Michael. We have so much synergy and alignment with the Mountain Tough principles. We tell people all the time, if you want a quick hack to change your life efficiently, if you're struggling with anxiety, depression, complacency, leave your phone at home and just go backpacking. Just go in the outdoors. Just go in the hills, the swamp, the ocean for 3 days. We need that vitamin D. We need that movement. Michael has a whole book on that called The Comfort Crisis. If you have not, I highly recommend you read that. That is a life-changing book. And everything we talked about today around the scarcity loop. Remember the big golden nugget there. I asked Michael that question, and particularly I focused on his own life and personally what he is doing and what works. And he answered me back with the answer around awareness. as soon as you understand the scarcity loop and that all of these companies are employing it so that we use their technology more and eat their processed food more, awareness is king. So just be aware that that is going on, and that will help you start putting some guardrails up with your own life, with your family, with your household. What a great conversation with Michael here at Tough Fest 2024. Love you guys, and I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast. We'll see you next week.